The Jedi and the Sith. Do both these groups take things to too much of an extreme? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and with this kind of being a slow movie weekend, I thought, what cool video could I make? And I still have Star Wars on my brain because we just recently got the new trailer for Star Wars The Last Jedi. So that's always super exciting. You can actually check out my reaction to that if you'd like to right now. But that was a really cool trailer. I'm, again, super hyped for Star Wars, so I thought, hey, one of the things that fascinates me so much is the Jedi and who they are, and the Sith and who they are, and I thought, let's just talk about that. So I was on Wikipedia, which I thought was really cool, that Wikipedia is something that actually exists, and I was reading the Jedi Code, which is always fascinating, and it says, there is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. On the surface, I think that all looks good. Then you move over here to the Sith Code. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me! Emphasis was added on my part. Point is when you look at these two codes like back to back, the Sith is like a direct rebellion against the Jedi and their code. So I mean, what is it that the Sith is rebelling against? Are they even right to rebel against it? Well, like as I watch episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars, which I still try to pretend don't exist, there's still some interesting Jedi things to be learned in this. I mean, for instance, the Jedi are taken as their young kids away from their families before they have the chance to grow attachments to them, because the whole thing of the Jedi is no spouse, no family. Like, you're not supposed to have these kind of attachments in your life.
Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden.
Why? Because the fear is, and as much as the Jedi don't want to operate on fear, that whole thing is fear. So the fear is, you know, if you have those attachments, how are you going to think clearly? How are you going to use the Force clearly? Say a Sith person kills your loved one. You're going to act in vengeance. You're going to act in fear. You're going to act on those emotions that suddenly well up out of nowhere. So the thought process then of the Jedi, grab them while they're young before they form any kind of attachment to their parents, and then raise them up in a controlled environment where their emotions can be numbed down so that way they won't even be tempted by the dark side. But I think common sense tells us that's just not reality. No matter how much you numb them, humans still have emotions. And the more you try to push them down, the more explosive they're going to erupt when they come out. Number two, you're not going to avoid temptation, ever. This world is full of temptation, our real world and that world, which is what I think makes the Force, the Jedi, all that so appealing, is because even though it's sci-fi fantasy, they're still dealing with heart issues that are real, the struggle between the dark and the light. So no matter what, that struggle, it's not eliminated. No matter how much you try to numb their feelings or teach them to bottle things up, it's not going to eliminate the reality that humans have emotions, that living beings have emotions, and that there is real temptation. So what really should be taught is, how do you deal with emotions when they rise up? How do you deal with temptation that comes? What's the right way to deal with it rather than, you know what, get rid of it altogether and just pretend it's not there? And when you really look at the Jedi in the extreme, I don't think the Jedi would ever say that's what they're saying. I don't think the Jedi would ever say, no, they're not going to say we're turning a blind eye to emotion, but when you look at the practice of it, that's kind of what it is. It's just, it's a practice of controlled environment, get rid of all those feelings, so that way they're never even tempted, which doesn't even work. And when you don't have that love, when you don't have that friendship, that companionship, and all those things because you're forbidden to have it, I mean, what are you even fighting for at that point? I mean, if you're fighting to protect and value life, but all those things that make life so valuable you can't experience, I feel like that, for me personally, would make it so much harder. But I think that's why the Sith rebelled, because I think that's an error in the way the Jedi did things, and I think the Sith saw and recognized that. But in their rebellion against that, they went way too far on the other side, where it's all about being ruled by your passions. It's all about being ruled by your emotions. But it goes deeper than that. It's not just about being ruled by emotions. It's about being ruled by your negative emotions.
The hate is swelling in you now. Strike me down with it. Give in to your anger. With each passing moment, you make yourself more my servant.
And I think that, honestly, we could all look at that and go, no, you might get a lot of anger and you might feel like you're getting a lot of power from negativity. But I think if you talk to anybody who has let their lives be ruled by their fears, by their anger, and by those kind of things, you would find that they had lived a life in prison more than they had lived a life of freedom. That stuff all becomes a prison all unto itself, man. And so, like, that's no way to live, and it just feels like it's a spiteful rebellion against what they felt were the errors of the Jedi, so they erred completely wrong in the other direction. The other consequence of that is the Sith are very predatory. Because when they're looking for new recruits, you know, when they want to get children when they're young and bring them into the Sith, or when they want to get adults and bring them in, what they're looking for is people who have been hurt, people who have been abused, people that are broken, and they want to prey on that brokenness and let that brokenness begin to not heal but rule that person. And then the way you even weed out who's the strongest, you know, if the apprentice can kill the master, then grand, because you only get one master, one apprentice, and whoever kills who is the one who's truly the strongest. And it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, the whole thing becomes predicated on evil. It becomes predicated on killing. It becomes predicated on fear. It becomes predicated on hate. It becomes predicated on vengeance. And it becomes predicated on you actually being a slave to those things, but covering up with this lie that that's freedom. So you have the one group that's lying and saying all this is freedom. You have the other group that is trying to have a good heart, but is lying like, oh no, just get rid of all those emotions and we're going to grow them up in a controlled environment because we can control that. Right. So it's like you have these two groups that I feel like have erred on two opposite ends of the spectrum here. And then I feel like we get the secret to the balance in the original trilogy. When you look at Anakin, he really is a prime candidate for Sith. He had a mother who loved him, yes, and she loved him very much. But he was taken away from her at kind of too young of an age, so he felt the pain of being taken away from her. He grew up impoverished, but not just impoverished, he grew up a slave where the rich here on Tatooine basically rule over the poor with an iron fist and push them around and abuse them and take advantage of them. So as much as Anakin did have love in his life from his mother, he grew up in a very abusive system. He was twisted and he was broken by that system and then heartbroken by being taken away from his mother. Going into a Jedi school that doesn't teach you how to deal with those kind of feelings and emotions and bring healing, but it's all about, no, let's do what we can now to numb what you're feeling so that you're not tempted by the dark side. You really shouldn't be here. You're too old. You already had attachments. You've already had this stuff. So this is kind of a dangerous game, but okay, we'll try to numb you up. And it's like, oh, are you serious? And so then when Anakin's mom gets killed, of course he doesn't know how to deal with it. I mean, no matter what, that anger is going to rise up. No matter what, that desire for vengeance is going to rise up. And that's the temptation of the Force. What do you do with that hurt? What do you do with those feelings? How do you deal with it in a healthy way? Not present it to him and not imparted into him. But here's the difference with his son, Luke Skywalker. Luke also grew up poor, but he grew up with his aunt and uncle who loved him. And I think love is the key to balance, as cheesy and cornball as it sounds, because think about it. Love brings respect. I mean, when you are loved, you know there's a certain amount of respect coming to you from that person who loves you. Like, they hold you in a certain esteem and they place a value on you. So when somebody loves you, you know there's respect coming in your direction and there's value being placed on your life. Unconditional love is also emotional security. I can't count how many times I've screwed up, but I do have that emotional security that my wife loves me unconditionally. You know, I grew up in a household, yeah, I made mistakes and there were consequences, but my parents loved me. So even when I messed up, there was an unconditional love there to meet me. And so that love brings security as well. It's amazing how love is kind of actually the balancer there. That's what Luke had. He didn't grow up in a controlled environment. He didn't grow up with the Jedi in their training school. He ended up doing that when he's, about 19, I think I read, when he started doing his training. So really old when he really started getting into training. But his advantage was he was loved. And he had that love imparted to him. So when he watched his aunt and uncle die, when he watched Obi-Wan die, when he found out Vader was his father and his father cut off his hand, he still has something good in there. Yeah, anger, hate, vengeance, all of that rose up. You know it did. You know fear and all that stuff rose up. You know it was present. But he had that base of love imparted into his life, and that made all the difference. Because in episode 6, when he had the chance to take out Vader, when Vader taunted him and that anger came out of him and he took Vader down, man, he had Vader down, but he was able to gain control and stop because he had that love. So he had that value placed on his life, and because it was imparted into him, it was in him to impart on somebody else. And that's what changed Vader in the end, wasn't it? That Vader killed the Emperor because he saw that his son loved him. He saw that his son cared enough for him to look past the exterior and look for the good in him. He saw that his son placed value on him. And what is amazing is how much that love makes a change. And I think that's extremely relatable because we know that's true in this world. And I know for me, the thing that makes that ultimately true is the love I know God has for me, which causes me to love God even more. Because even when I look at Christianity, and I can see sometimes it can get all about the list of don'ts. Sometimes, in Christianity, we get so caught up in things, it becomes more about the religion than it does about the relationship. It becomes about the list of do's and don'ts than it does about what love really is, that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And it's amazing when we let that love in our hearts, it's transformative. And I have found that even that love gives me the strength to do good when in situations where I want to do evil because I'm so angry and I'm so tempted. It's that love that inspires me in a good way to make a different decision. So it's amazing how when we let that love in our lives, it is transformative. And the amazing thing about that love, it's not a predator going after prey. It's love seeking to redeem. So you find yourself hurt, abused, lost, and broken. It's that love that can actually bring transformation and actually bring healing instead of just suppression. It's amazing how love is a transformative thing. So that's kind of what I'm saying here. Did the Jedi and did the Sith, did they err in opposite directions? Yes, I think the Jedi had it wrong in some places, and I definitely think the Sith had it wrong in some places. The balance to the Force, love, and letting that love be imparted into the soul. That is the real thing that really needed to be done, especially in raising and training up those Jedis, in my humble opinion. But there are a lot of other Star Wars experts out there that are way more versed in this universe than I am, and I'm happy to admit that. So, if you are watching and you have far more knowledge on Star Wars than me, and I missed some things, that's cool. I'd love to actually have a discussion with you about those things. So you can leave that in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with you about the Jedi and the Sith and just Star Wars in general. And while you're there leaving comments, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Next to the subscribe button is that bell. Click it. That way you're notified the moment I drop new videos and fun things like that. I'm Durbin. Thank you for checking out Durbania.